Hi, everybody. Today is Monday, May 19th, 2025, and our friend Pepe Escobar is back with us. Welcome back, Pepe.
Enormous pleasure to be with you, Nima. I survived everything for the past 2 weeks just to be with you today.
Tell us about your visit to Iran, and after how
Wow.
how, how many years you got back to Iran?
This was my first trip after COVID. This is something that when I say in Tehran, people love it. I have been going to Tehran regularly since the Khatami years. So my first long trip in Iran was in 98, if I'm not mistaken. So I kept going back. I think I went probably around 10 times or so. When I was with Asia Times, I went to Iran, if not every year, every 2 years or so. I even published an ebook, but that's Asia Times and the American Bankers. It was on sale on their website for a while, and then obviously not anymore. But this ebook, it was called Persian Mirrors. It was a selection of my reportage in Iran and after my travels to Iran. A lot of stuff. Interviews with Ayatollahs, a visit to Mashhad, my coverage of the JCPOA 10 years ago and all that. So I hope one day, soon, I want to make this available for free for my readers and for everybody else, probably on my Substack account. So my relationship with Iran has been evolving, for over a quarter of a century. I learned immensely from everybody. I made some very good connections. And in the beginning of this trip was fantastic because it was a mix of hardcore politics, geopolitical discussions. We had a round table at the top university. It started as US-Iran relations, but then I forced it to be a discussion about the new great game, in fact. The empire on one side and Eurasian integration on the other side. And at the same time, I was having Shiite theology discussions. Very, very serious stuff. It's something that I had been studying for decades as well. And one of my best friends in Tehran, his pen name is Blake Archer Williams, because he studied for a long time in Berkeley. He studied Western philosophy in Berkeley. He knows Shiite theology very well. And the comparisons that he makes between Western philosophy and Shiite philosophy and theology are fascinating. So when we have a dinner, it's a dinner about Sufism, about Shiite theology, about the meaning of Velayat Ifaki, fantastic. And then one day we were also, some of us were summoned by the CEO of Press TV, a wonderful guy, Ahmad Nourouzi, to his office because he wanted to introduce us to a top Shiite theologian. So we had a 2.5-hour discussion once again about meaning of Ayatollahs, meaning of Velayat Faqih, meaning of Sufism, search for oneness, the moral collapse and nihilistic collapse of the West and all that. Only in Iran you can have discussions at this level, Nima. It's very, very impressive. And it can be on an academic setting, on a media setting, or on a dinner. It's immensely impressive. So it's an enormously cultured population, as you know very well. The level of Iranian universities is up there, something that I saw all over again. Discussing politics, discussing philosophy, and then the best possible surprise that I could have, which was to go on the road in Iran, across the middle corridor, to the Caspian, and then to the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman, all the way to the Iran-Pakistani border, tracking the international north-south transportation corridor. And for me, this was like a gift from heaven, literally, because our gracious hosts in Tehran, I think over a month, before I arrived, I emailed them and said, look, is it possible for you to arrange me 2 trips? I want to go to the Caspian, and I want to go then to Bandar Abbas in the Persian Gulf, and if possible, the port of Chabahar, which is part of the North-South corridor, because I want to do a long study about the international North-South transportation corridor. So I arrived in Tehran, and on the first day, guess what? They decided to do a documentary about my investigation. And I said, wow. So from one day to another, I had a crew of 6 ultra pro, wonderful people, cameraman, sound, producer, translator, etc. And we started going all over the place. We started doing interviews in Tehran. And then our first trip, we went to the, let's say, the middle corridor. That's the main highway crossing run from north to south. We went as far as Isfahan. And then came back, we stopped at Qom in the middle of the night. And then after that, we went to the Caspian. By van, in fact, which takes, it's a long time. From Tehran to Bandar Anzali in the Caspian is like 6 hours at least. And then we analyzed what was going on in this port, because this port is going to be very important for the corridor. For instance, I saw ships, Russian ships from Astrakhan, docking at Bandar Anzali, but with enormous infrastructure problems. No? And then after that, I started to compare what I was seeing at the port in the Caspian to what I had heard before in Tehran by specialists, top connectivity Iranian specialists. They were telling me, for instance, the Russians, you know, when they look at the Caspian, they look at the lack of infrastructure in Iran, they don't think that traveling across the Caspian by ship is the best way for the corridor. They want to build a railway on the western margin of the Caspian, or they want to use an enormous network of railways coming from south central Russia, crossing to Kazakhstan, connecting to Turkmenistan, and then connecting to Tehran. And then you take the middle corridor and you go south to the Persian Gulf. So it was fascinating from my point of view to actually see why the Russians wanted to do that. Was priceless. But you have to go to Bandar Anzali, to a port in the Caspian, to see the lack of infrastructure. Why? Sanctions, Nima. This is something that you know very well. We see the devastating effect of decades of sanctions against Iran in so many details everywhere, you know. Like without sanctions, Iran would be today like a series of Dubais or Abu Dhabis or Dohas, you know. But because of the sanctions, you see the infrastructural problems and the lack of investment everywhere. It's a very, very sad state of affairs. They are catching up, of course, but it's very, very difficult. And they have to find, which they always tell you, they have to dribble to get technology and infrastructure investment from anywhere that they can. So, you know, this trip in itself was outstanding, because then we went to the Persian Gulf. We flew to Bandar Abbas, which is the largest Iranian port, key port for the new Silk Road Chinese style, and for the international North-South transportation corridor as well. And from there, we went finally to the port of Chabahar in Sistan Baluchistan province, which is a dream. I had known the Pakistani Baluchistan region. I traveled over there even before 9/11 quite extensively. But I could never go to Sistan Baluchistan in Iran. And Nima, you know very well, they will always tell me, no, it's very, the security is not guaranteed. You know, they could even kidnap you. We cannot take responsibility for having a foreigner over there. So I could never get a permit. And this time, finally, because we are with our official crew, They had all the permits. We could go anywhere. It was absolutely outstanding. We had a special permit to tour the whole port of Bandar Abbas. They don't give this, every day. So we had full access to everything in the port. We could talk to anybody we wanted. Chabahar, we had a committee waiting for us. We had the guys from the Chabahar Free Trade Zone. They said, they're open to everything. They can film anywhere they want and all that. So this was priceless because we had the opportunity to see everything that works and everything that still does not work when it comes to implementing this enormously ambitious north-south transportation corridor, which, as our audience now may be familiar with, starts in St. Petersburg in Russia, goes to Astrakhan in the Russian Caspian, crosses the Caspian or goes through a railway, crosses Iran from north to south, arrives in Bandar Abbas or Chabahar, and then Maritime Silk Road to Mumbai in India. Or in the case of China, which I personally saw several Chinese cargoes unloading in Bandar Abbas and in Chabahar as well, to Eastern China. To give an idea, all of you, the distance between Chabahar and Mumbai is only 4 days of navigation. It's nothing. From the point of view of trade between these two BRICS, Iran and India, wow, the possibilities are endless. And from Chabahar to Shanghai is 15 days, which is also not much. And the Chinese obviously are already using it. They are using Chabahar and they are using Bandar Abbas as well. And then to make a story short, Nima, because I could go on forever talking about this trip, but people read the column. My column probably is going to be out tomorrow on Sputnik. And I more or less talk about everything that I've been telling you. And of course, the Holy Grail was to get to the Iran-Pakistani border, finally. And you know how I did it? By boat. I went to a fishing village, very, very small, right at the border. We were there, we were talking to the fishermen, and we met a teenager. The guy was probably, 13, 14 max, with a beautiful boat, with his little brother as his second in command. I said, okay, can we rent our boat? Let's go to the border. I said, okay, I'll take you there. I'll show you the border, literally. So we went, we navigated about 20, 25 minutes, and we reached the maritime Iran-Pakistani border. So for a geopolitical analyst and a reporter and a nomad like me, it's like one of those holy grail moments, And of course, the beauty is, unlike the actual border between both Baluchistans, where there is a lot of infiltration by MI6, CIA, loads of cash financing fake Salafi jihadis, loads of cash financing the Baluchistan Liberation Movement, which is crammed with Wahhabists as well. You are in the middle of the sea, and you see the beauty of the sea, and you see the invisible encounter, because it's the same sea, obviously. The Sea of Oman on the Iranian side, and the Arabian Sea on the Pakistani side. So this is one of those moments that stay with you forever. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So that was the icing on the cake. But then when we came back to Chabahar, was great, because talking about the development possibilities of the Chabahar Free Trade Zone, they're very optimistic. You feel a city that is booming everywhere. The possibilities of everything, tourism, surfing, are limitless. Can you imagine a virgin coast with crystalline sea for almost 1,000 kilometers, unspoiled, with rock formations behind? It's absolutely outstanding, small fishing ports, fishing villages, So they can develop that. Absolutely amazing. So it was great to see that this region in Iran that carries potential for development in every sense, and starting with international trade, really no limits. So that was the beautiful end of this magnificent adventure in Iran.
Foi maravilhosa. Já senti saudade. That was amazing.
É a sua terra, né? It's your land, Nima, and you know some of these places, of course. Yeah.
Pepe, while you were in Iran, and I know that you talk with many people in Iran and some officials, how do they feel about the way that Donald Trump and his administration trying to manipulate, somehow change the rhetoric? Here is Witkoff in his recent interview on one of the mainstream media, ABC News. He was talking about the way that he sees the ongoing talks between the United States and Iran. Here is what he said, Pepe.
With Iran, can you give us a sense of what is the outline of the deal that President Trump wants to get with Iran?
Well, the president has been very clear. He wants to solve this conflict diplomatically and with dialogue. And he's given all the signals. He's directly sent letters to the supreme leader. I have been dispatched to deliver that message as well, and I've delivered it. But on the other hand, we have one very, very clear red line, and that is enrichment. We cannot allow even 1% of an enrichment capability. We've delivered a proposal to the Iranians that we think addresses some of this without disrespecting them. And so that's important. We want to get to a solution here, and we think that we will be able to. But everything begins from our standpoint, John, with a deal that does not include enrichment. We cannot have that because enrichment enables weaponization, and we will not allow a bomb to get here. But short of that, there are all kinds of ways for us to achieve our goals in this negotiation. We think that we will be meeting sometime this week in Europe, and we hope that it will lead to some real positivity, and that's where we are, sir.
When you hear the foreign minister of Iran is talking about that, doesn't matter what they're talking about, we're not going to stop enriching uranium. And how do you find the position of Iran right now? How do they see the United States and the way that they're changing every time Witkoff is just talking with any of these outlets in the mainstream media? He's just changing what, I don't know, he's honest the way that he's picturing it, or he's trying to put some sort of pressure on Iran?
He's not being totally honest, Nima, to be very diplomatic about it. Well, first of all, he's not a diplomat. He's a real estate developer. Good thing for him is that he's a lawyer, which I assume, being a lawyer, he understands when he's talking to the Russians and he's talking to the Iranians, legal aspects of what Trump is demanding or will demand. The problem is the circus ringmaster, President of the United States. He has 3 or 4 different sound bites a day, usually contradicting each other on every issue, especially the possibility of a JCPOA 2.0 under Trump 2.0. One day he's saying we're very close to a deal. The next day he's threatening to bomb Iran again. One day he's saying, now the conversations are excellent with Witkoff, Araghchi, etc. And the next day he's saying, no, I'm gonna block them to sell all of their oil. So the other day, I think it was yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, President Pezeshkian himself, he probably lost his patience and said, okay, if you block our oil, we block everybody's oil. Meaning we close the Strait of Hormuz and we kaput with the global economy in 24 hours, which Iran can do like this. And everybody in the Pentagon knows it because they already gamed all this. And all the results are absolutely devastating. So Iran is being provoked all the time. And then we have one of two sound bites coming from the president or from Witkoff, which more or less trying to appease Iranians. In Tehran, Nima, it's a very nuanced landscape, intellectually and conceptually. I could try to break it down into two camps. There is a camp which is, you know what I'm talking about when I mention North Tehran. Let's say the North Tehran Atlanticist camp, which is totally in favor of any sort of accommodation with the US, assuming that the US is going to erase all the sanctions against Iran, which is something that will never happen. And of course, there is a camp that I could qualify as the IRGC camp, which of course is very influential with the supreme leader. And this is something that they told me that I didn't know. And it came from a very, very good source. Do you know who is the go-between at the highest level between the supreme leader and the leadership of the IRGC? His son, Moshtaba. I didn't know that. And I confirmed it with other sources as well. I said, yes, if it's very rare, because usually the leadership of the IRGC, at the highest level, they get along, of course, with the supreme leader very well, and they respect him. It's a limitless respect. But of course, there are currents inside the military, right? So Mujtaba, Khamenei's son, is, which could point to many of us as he's being trained and groomed to be a possible successor in the future. This is something that is openly discussed in Tehran. Very, very important. But the IRGC camp, they know by experience that they cannot trust anything coming from any American administration, because they know exactly who controls any American administration. We don't have to spell it out, right? Now our audience knows very well. So there is a serious clash of perceptions at the highest level in Tehran, And I heard a lot of serious criticism of Pezeshkian. Very, very serious. And at the same time, let's say the more occidentalized strata of businessmen in Iran, etc., they want normalization with the West, no matter what it takes. But this no matter includes losing Iranian sovereignty. You'll never fly. And you'll never fly, not only with the leadership, but with the majority of the Iranian population as well. As you know, Persians and Iranians are very proud, not only of their immense history and culture, but nowadays about the resistance spirit of the Islamic Revolution. You may agree or not agree with the Velayat Efaki system, the rule of the jurisprudent, the guided democracy, this mix of theocracy and democracy. We can discuss about this ad infinitum. But the fact is, in terms of a power of resistance on a global level against an empire, it's very hard to beat Iran this past 4 decades plus, So when we have Witkoff in the tape that you just showed us saying respecting Iran, no. To propose zero enrichment is a profound disrespect of Iranians' rights. Iranians have the right to have a nuclear civilian program like they have and to enrich uranium for it. Because it's completely absurd. What Witkoff doesn't say, and it's what we know since 2015 during the JCPOA discussions, is that the real motive behind everything, the American machinations, let's put it this way, is the Iranian missile program and the support of Iran to the axis of resistance as a whole. This has nothing to do with the so-called Iranian nuclear program or the JCPOA or a possible JCPOA 2.0. These are the unspoken, invisible rationales behind everything that the Americans do, whoever is in power, and it's not going to change. For instance, one of the extraordinary moments of this trip, we were touring the IRGC Aerospace Museum in Tehran. So we got a briefing from a brigadier general, then we're touring, we're looking at the Shaheeds, we're looking at the Fatahs, and I saw my opening because I had already asked my guests, please try to get a meeting with some of us, with the top IRGC general. They said, yes, we're trying, it's difficult, especially with foreign media, etc., etc. So when I saw an IRGC brigadier general in front of me, that was my opening. So I asked him point blank. And it was great because this was recorded, and then he was on X, he was traveling all over. But it was great to actually ask this question to a top-level brigadier general. It was about Operation True Promise 3. And my question was very simple. It's being interpreted all across the West, especially in Washington and in Tel Aviv, as a sign of weakness. So, do you have an Operation True Promise 3 ready? Are you going to launch it? Are you waiting for the right moment to launch it? And his answer, which then somebody translated from Farsi very faithfully, not the translator that was in front of us at the center. His translation was really, really, really lousy. Then we got a good translation, and the response of the brigadier general was very diplomatic, firm, straight to the point. Yes, it's not my decision. It's the decision of the general staff. And when they tell us, we'll fulfill it. But yes, the operation is ready to go. It's just a matter of choosing the right timing. So this means it was great to have this confirmation directly that, yes, they don't forget what happened. They have a response for Israel. They can up the ante any moment they want to. And they are carefully examining their options, especially because now there is this semi-dialogue between Tehran and Washington, between Arakshi and Witkoff. We don't know where this is going to end, Nima. And in Tehran, people have no illusions where this is going to lead. Because, once again, every day you have a different tidbit, a different nugget that betrays what the Americans really want, which is to inflict maximum pressure by other means. It's not only sanctions after sanctions, not only, it's, you don't want to talk to us and accept our demands that are absolutely unilateral vis-a-vis your civilian nuclear program. Okay, we can bomb you, or you won't be able to sell your oil. How can you possibly have a diplomatic discussion under these terms? So there are no illusions. And I'm sure this North Tehran Atlanticist West toxification, to remember a term that was coined by an Iranian decades ago, this crowd is trying to understand that reality is much more complicated than their dreams of having normal relations with the West. It's much more complicated. And of course, the Zionist axis around Trump and of course around US and big European capitals is working nonstop to sabotage any possibility of a dialogue. But once again, when you compare the element of realism among deciding powers in Moscow and in Tehran, it's quite similar in a sense. They know who they're dealing with, and especially they know what kind of invisible actors they are dealing with. Yeah.
You've mentioned something important that, in my understanding, is somehow shows what Donald Trump thinks about the current talks between Iran and the United States, which is his latest position on the talks. He said that if we're gonna reach a deal with Iran, or I'm not gonna let them sell any oil.
Exactly.
Before he was talking about, I'm gonna attack Iran if
Yes.
they don't. Do you think that they're pushing? You talk about JCPOA, and they're pushing for the snapback sanctions.
Snapback sanctions.
Which,
exactly.
yeah. Do you believe that would work for the United States? In my understanding, Europe is not that powerful right now. Is in a very weak position right now if they go in that direction. Russia and China are not on board with that decision with the United States, and the region has changed drastically. Nothing. We after all, we can say they can cooperate with the United States, but they're not willing to go to any sort of they don't like any sort of conflict with Iran, between the United States and Iran. I think they have expressed this with the United States, with this visit of Donald Trump in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, UAE, name it. He knows what these Arab states want. Go ahead.
We all know who's I would say probably the only power that over 100% wants a war against Iran that they don't have to fight, that they want the United States to fight. We all know that. Nobody in West Asia and nobody in Europe, we can say that with a measure of certainty, wants a war against Iran. Only this particular power. And because they run the United States, as we know, they will never give up. The Iranians also know this very, very well. We may wonder to what extent Donald Trump himself knows that. What we know is that he hates to be manipulated, which is a good point, because he's being manipulated all the time by those genocidals in Tel Aviv. So he may snap one way or another during this, let's say, pre-peace process between Washington and Iran, and then go hard for a deal. The problem is, even if he had a deal with Iran, silos of the deep state and factions of the deep state will do everything to sabotage it. And we know what kind of people are implanted in these silos in the deep state. So it's a practically unsolvable situation. This impasse can go on for other decades. We already have more than 4, no? The impasse between the Islamic Republic and Washington. We could go on for another 4 easily. With these threats going up and down all around, the maximum pressure at different levels. The difference is that Iran now has options. Iran doesn't need the US and Iran doesn't need Europe. As much as the Pezeshkian crowd, they want good relations with Europe. And there are some European capitals who also want to reestablish the relatively decent commercial relations they had with Iran in the past. Iran is part of the Eurasia integration axis. And Iran has 2 strategic partnerships that are worth, not gold or platinum, rare earths, Russia and China, the top 2 BRICS, who also have Iran's back. So anything that the Zionist axis may try against Iran is not going to be against Iran. It's going to be against these 3 BRICS together at different levels, with diplomatic support, military support, you name it, right? And for instance, this trip of analyzing the North-South transportation corridor, all the time, everywhere I was always thinking about the limitless possibilities for these 3 BRICS, and not even counting China, Russia, India, and Iran, to bypass the West completely in trade, in commerce, in doing trade in their own currencies, in using BRICS mechanisms mechanisms that they discuss when they sit at the BRICS table, the three of them with the others. Not to mention China as well. China, they're looking at Chabahar, for instance. They said, look, we can have, the Indians are investing in Chabahar. Not too much, by the way. That's another stuff that I learned over there. The development of the port of Chabahar is the Iranian government that is paying everything. The Indians are investing in equipment. For instance, I was looking at the cranes at the port, and it was written India Power something. And then I asked, are these cranes from India? They said, yes, they are Italian cranes, but the Indians sent it to Chabahar. So this is what they do. They invested in equipment. But the infrastructure of the port and the superstructure of the port is the Iranian government that is putting a lot of money on it. The Chinese, if they arrive tomorrow, they look at the port, they say, okay, we're going to turn this into a new Shanghai in a few years. They can do it. They have the know-how, they have the unlimited funds, and it's going to profit them, China, as another, let's say, corridor in the new Silk Roads. So it's not only the middle corridor, let's put it this way, that China is using, crossing Iran from east to west. Their maritime Silk Road goes through the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, Sea of Oman as well. They can use Chabahar also as a stepping stone in their new Silk Roads as well. And I'm sure they're going to do it sooner or later. And the guys from the Chabahar Free Trade Zone, they said, the Chinese are getting interested more and more in what we're doing here. Of course. And infrastructure, Nima. For instance, the Chabahar, we arrived at a very small military airport in Chabahar in the middle of nowhere with zero infrastructure. I said, my God, I think I am in sub-Saharan Africa here. And this is southeast Iran. The Chinese, in 6 months, they go there, they build a brand new airport with state-of-the-art infrastructure. I'm sure sooner or later they're going to do that because they will integrate Chabahar into another Chinese maritime corridor. And that's inevitable. From the point of view of Iran, the possibilities, for instance, the Russians trying to build a railway on the western margin of the Caspian. Why? Because the infrastructure of the Iranian port in the Caspian is minimalistic. And the Russians are saying, look, it's not fast enough. We're going to build a railway, it's going to be much faster. So, you have endless investing opportunities from both Russia and China. And, of course, the fact that Iran now is an important BRICS member, there can be, for instance, help from the new development bank, for instance, for projects in Iran, etc. So they have endless possibilities. They don't need the West anymore. So this pressure from the Americans, it's still the mindset that our friend Wang Yi, Chinese foreign minister, it's a Cold War mentality. Yes, it's still a Cold War mentality. They haven't learned anything this past half a century or so, And Iran is not easily intimidated, as you know very well, on top of all that. And if there would be an attack, the response will be absolutely devastating. We just saw a fragment of what they have in the IRGC Aerospace Museum. All those Shaheeds, the latest Fatah. The latest Fatah, if I'm not mistaken, came out less than 2 years ago. So they have new Fatah designs as well. They have hypersonic missiles. They can block the Strait of Hormuz in 2 or 3 hours with 10,000 missiles. You name it. So you won't intimidate the Islamic Republic. What they need, of course, is, I would say, a more managerial, professional approach to the overall Iranian economy. I heard a lot of people complaining about those zillions of zeros when you change. But in fact, nobody knows the exchange rate in Iran anymore. Apparently, something around 800,000 rials for $1. People doesn't even know what that means. But when you look at the cost,
nobody using real anymore.
And nobody uses the real, as you know, Nima. Exactly. Everything is dollarized. Absolutely. You go to a hotel, you're paying dollars. Exactly. Well, and then, but when you look at the cost of living, it's amazing. Examples. Full tank of gas. We stopped and I was looking at the machine. I wanted to say, and then I asked, okay, how much is that? $2 for a full tank of gas. Where in the world do we have that? Not even in Venezuela you have that. And then I was asking about monthly costs. For a family of 4, let's put it this way, water, electricity, and a fixed telephone line costs less than $5 a month. So it's absolutely amazing. And you have this inflation, of course. The inflation, they say officially is 40%. It's probably much, much more. And no exchange rate with those zillions of zeros. But people survive. There's lots of bartering. You go to any city, small city, village, etc. It's booming. Trade is booming everywhere. There are problems with bringing foreign currency. For instance, I went to the Isfahan Bazaar, which is absolutely magnificent. And I became friends with a guy who sells nomad carpets. And I bought a fantastic carpet from northeast Afghanistan, Iran, bordering Afghanistan. In fact, very rare, for an incredible price, because he said, look, you're the first foreigner who comes here in quite a while. Turkey has 40 million tourists a year, maybe more. Here we have 1 or 2. And I looked around in the bazaar, and he was right, because there were very few Europeans. And this is one of the most beautiful and dynamic bazaars in the whole of Islam. It's absolutely outstanding. And Isfahan is itself one of the most beautiful cities in Islam. Very few Europeans, visitors mainly from the Persian Gulf, Central Asia, and some from China and India. And not buying, mostly not buying artifacts of value, just tourist trinkets. You know. Like a bazaar at this level, this Isfahan Bazaar is at the level of the Istanbul Grand Bazaar. All the beauties that you find in Istanbul, you can also find in Isfahan, you know, similar quality. And the quality of the craftsmanship is outstanding, of course, you know. But they need tourists, they need foreigners coming, they need foreign currency. So this is something that Iran have endless opportunities, but especially to promote Iran around the East. Forget about the West. American tourists won't go to Iran. Even our friends are afraid to come to Iran, you know. And Europeans, because of the European economic crisis all over Europe, even Europeans coming here to Thailand, they are shrinking by the day, you know. They don't have disposable income anymore in the West. And everybody is absolutely paranoid with the future. So Iran should invest in their own policy, which means look east. You remember that during Khomeini was neither east nor west. This past few years is look east. Yes, that's it. You look east, and the east is immense. And you have very good political capital all across the east. People in Asia understand Iran. They are naturally attracted to the marvels of Iran, the beauties of Iran, and the spirit of resistance. Very, very important as well. So that's it. So a nation like that cannot be easily pressured by a declining empire. But try to explain that in Washington, even.
I think that's why Donald Trump has changed his rhetoric, and he's considering somehow putting more sanctions, snapback sanctions, all of that. Here is what he said about the military power of Iran. He specifically is talking about drones.
Okay.
I asked one of the companies, I said, I want a lot of drones. And, you know, in the case of Iran, they make a good drone. and they make them for $35,000-$40,000. So I said to this company, I want to see it. They came in 2 weeks later with a drone that cost $41 million. I said, that's not what I'm talking about, $41 million. I'm talking about something for $35,000-$40,000 where you send thousands of them up. And that's a great way. And they're very good, too, and fast and deadly. Horrible, actually. When you look at what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, the drone is killing tremendous numbers of people. You hide behind a tree and the drone comes down and it circles you with fire. You don't have a chance. The tree comes down also.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, the drone specialist.
It seems that they talk a lot about drones to him.
But it's true. When you look at the Shaheeds, wow. And obviously,
Iran has changed a lot in terms of their military. They're so much powerful right now.
Extremely powerful. And it's no wonder that the Russians took the offer. Already 2 years ago, when there were Iranian delegations going to Russia a lot, and they were saying to the Russians, anything you want, just ask. And the Russians said, okay, bring us your best Shahed drones. Absolutely. Yes, and they make a killing in Ukraine, no question. So no wonder Trump is impressed. Just like he was impressed by the Houthis. No? Finally, he lost a war against the Houthis, so he had at least to,
But he knows he lost it to whom. Yeah, the Houthis, I think that the lesson coming from the conflict between the United States and Yemen is the key in all the calculation that they do these days in Washington. They know if they go big against Iran, they're not gonna win, or they're gonna be hugely influenced. And look at what China would do if that happens. They're just gonna.
Well, the Chinese demonstration in the mini war between Iran and Pakistan was extremely impressive. It rattled completely the whole Western industrial military complex.
Between India and Pakistan.
Fighters, we have the best weapon. No, you don't. The Chinese have a systems warfare working in perfection, ultra well synchronized, and they have a jet fighter that costs $40 million and does the job, costing 6 times less than a bloody French Rafale, which is a Louis Vuitton, a flying Louis Vuitton that is worth nothing. So this was another wake-up call. And I'm sure people in the Pentagon looked at that and said, oh my God. And these are not even the latest Chinese jet fighters, Nima. The Chinese already have 6th generation jet fighters that they are testing right now. These are the old export models. Can you imagine the new ones? So, but it gets more dangerous by the minute, because those people with brains that remain in the industrial military complex in the world, they are very, very, very smart people, no question about that. Realists. When they look at the chessboard, and when they look at the chessboard in geopolitics, in geoeconomics, and in the military field, they have to despair. How can they digest the fact that they were humiliated by the Houthis in the Red Sea? Completely. And the Houthis were on the verge of sinking an aircraft carrier. That went very, very close. And now it's even admitted between Washington and New York. Can you imagine with Iran?
We know that today Donald Trump, maybe as we talk, they're still talking to each other, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin.
They're still talking. Have you seen the past?
I've just checked the news and nothing came out.
I'm checking now, and they're still talking.
Yeah, they're still talking.
Wow.
And
so this means what? This means 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yes.
2 hours.
2 hours. Apparently now, Ima, 3 or 4 minutes ago, now they're saying it was a 2-hour conversation.
It was 2 hours.
And with the Putin declaration that translated from Russia would mean something like necessary to develop most effective path to peace, which doesn't mean much. Now, let's wait for the Kremlin readout, or at least the Kremlin interpretation. There won't be a readout because it's too long. The Kremlin interpretation.
That took a lot to just
say
something, just
yeah,
to
but
describe the basics of the conflict.
No, but we were expecting a long phone call, because this is the phone call that's going to set the pattern for the next weeks and months. And if there is a possibility of an adult conversation or an adult negotiation. So certainly Putin was impressing on Trump, look, if you're serious about a deal, these are the conditions. You know the conditions because I outlined the conditions months ago, and I outlined the conditions to you again this past few weeks. So that's it. And we're not going to move away from our conditions. Everybody in Russia knows that. Nobody in Washington knows that. So Trump has to be convinced himself. And obviously, because everything is narcissus, everything is out of control ego, if he still has in his mind this thing of he's going to get a Nobel Peace Prize as the peacemaker in the war that his own empire started, by the way, the only chance is an adult dialogue with Putin and not trying to fool Putin around. We don't know if Trump already has, if it's already inside his brain, this concept. So maybe this phone call advanced a little bit along these lines, a dose of realism coming from Putin and Trump understanding the limits of this negotiation, and especially understanding that he's on the losing side. The empire is losing this war. Russia, as the winner, is dictating the terms. And Putin can find a way to dictate the terms in a very, very softly way. But still, Russia will dictate the terms. Otherwise, it's what we hear when we are in Moscow every day. The battles and the war will be decided in the battlefield. And it goes as long as it takes, which was exactly what Medinsky, a very good historian, told the Ukrainian delegation. You want to keep fighting for another 21 years? No problem. For us, we did this with Sweden. We can do this with you. Again, we don't care. You don't want the deal that it's now. You're going to lose more. Next time it's going to be 5, 6, 8, 10 regions, oblasts, whatever. So one thing is the negotiator telling those stupid Ukrainian negotiators. Another thing is Putin diplomatically telling the president of the United States, look, this is the outline of our demands. And it's not, okay, what can you offer in return? So this was obviously the heart of the matter of this long phone call.
You see somehow some sort of dishonesty in the behavior of the Trump administration, because when you see the mainstream media pushing for more sanctions on Russia, here is what Scott Bessent said, the U.S. Treasury Secretary of the United States.
To impose sanctions against Russia?
Well, I think we will see what happens when both sides get to the table. President Trump has made it very clear that if President Putin does not negotiate in good faith, that the United States will not hesitate to up the Russia sanctions along with our European partners. What I can tell you is the sanctions were very ineffective during the Biden administration because they kept them low because they were afraid of pushing up domestic oil prices.
Very quickly, how long for the timeline?
Yeah, it's just, the level of ignorance is unbelievable.
The level of ignorance is abysmal. This guy's the secretary of the... predictable, Nima. predictable because Washington as a whole is a low IQ company town. When you live there, you see for yourself. And the really smart people are not in positions of power, by definition. So you have low lives like Scott Bessent, threatening sanctions again, and even recognizing that the sanctions so far have been useless. So, they don't know how to think. And obviously they have to repeat the same mantras, especially when they are being interviewed by by American mainstream media. American mainstream media, they have their list of obsessions. If you get out of this window, they don't even know what you're talking about. So it's for domestic public consumption, essentially. The problem is this is picked up by everybody around the world.
He reminds me, Pete Hegseth, the head of Pentagon, before going to war with Yemen.
Exactly.
We are doing something. We are going to do something different. Biden was so weak.
Because we need to send a message. You remember? We're doing because we can, and we want to send a message. So the message hit him in the face like this, total blowback. Oof.
Pepe, do you think that in the mind of the Putin administration, do they really believe that they can achieve something with these talks, or they're getting to a point that let's decide about the end of the conflict on the battlefield, because Donald Trump is not doing anything? They have to, let's remember what has happened, Pepe. They hope that Donald Trump would convince Zelensky or put pressure on Zelensky to put an end to the conflict. He didn't do that.
He didn't do it.
And Europeans were manipulating Zelensky and just playing with Zelensky and somehow to convince Donald Trump that the way that they're thinking about Ukraine is better than what the United States had to offer. And right now, Russia didn't want to negotiate with Zelensky because they thought that Zelensky is not the official president of Ukraine. They have changed it because they saw Donald Trump is not capable of negotiating, talking with Zelensky in a proper way. That's why, in my opinion, they have changed their mind to just directly talk with Ukrainian delegation, with Zelensky administration. It's all about Donald Trump himself and his administration. The problem comes from Washington.
Of course, and because it's so hyper-centralized, it depends on the president of the United States' whims, fantasies, desires, or throwing a tantrum like a child, changing his mind 4 or 5 times a day and then changing it all over again the next day. Once again, it's rational actors like the circle of power in Moscow dealing with something completely irrational, run like a reality show. So there are no parameters whatsoever. No wonder he cannot force anything on the Europeans, because the Europeans are developing their own warmongering strategy, and much less on this ridiculous actor, which in fact disrespects the president of the United States in public. It's no wonder. So Trump is not controlling anything. He's not controlling the process because he doesn't have a strategy. That's the key of the whole thing. Trump 2.0 vis-a-vis this proxy war, they have a zero strategy. The Russians see it right through. But they are managing and they are navigating this lack of strategy. Without illusions and knowing, once again, whatever happens, the only solution for specifically Ukraine is going to be in the battlefield. It could be in 2025. The war can go on to 2026 or even 2027. Doesn't matter. Really, it doesn't matter. That's extrapolating from what Medinsky said. Medinsky basically said this war can go on until the next decade. for Russians, because everything that the delimitations from the beginning of the SMO, they continue the same. But the big picture will never be addressed by any American government. And it was the essence of those letters that Putin sent to the Pentagon and to NATO in December 2021 about indivisibility of security and establishing a new paradigm in the post-Soviet space, in Europe, and all together. Can you imagine Donald Trump discussing new spheres of influence and a new paradigm, military and geopolitical, across Eurasia and Europe? Of course not. It's not going to happen. And even if he wanted, they wouldn't let him do it. The deep state and the American ruling classes will never let him do it. So it's an impasse. So the Russians look at the big picture and say, no, we won't have any definition anytime soon. And when they look at the smaller picture, said, okay, we'll keep going our way, conquering village after village. Sooner or later, maybe we can annex 1 or 2 more regions, perhaps 3 or 4 in the long run, and we keep doing it. It's very hard for any of us observing how the SMO is progressing, how the dementia of the previous American administration is mixing into the circles of the new administration. What do they have to offer the Russians as losers in this war against this list of Russian demands? If we look at all this, this enormous chessboard moving a little bit all the time, we don't see a rational end game. With this administration, much less, because they are, by definition, because this is Donald Trump, irrational. So it's we are all caught in a bind. But as we know, and as you know, Nima, and our audience, all of you, the Russians are extremely patient. If they have to wait for a decade for a solution to this whole drama, they will. Fighting, of course.
Just to wrap up this session, Pepe, it seems that Donald Trump is in a very special, I would say, in many outstanding position right now, because if he wanted to put pressure on Zelensky, he was able to do that. If he wanted to put pressure on European leaders, he was able. He knows that the public opinion in Europe, how much they're not supporting their leaders right now. For whatever reason, he's not doing this. And I don't know how is that all about the establishment in the United States, is about the way that Europe would play a role in some sort of economic war between the United States and China. I don't know. There is a complexity of issues there. And what's your take on that?
It was my last answer to you, in fact. He could have started applying pressure on both Kiev and Europe on day one. In fact, in the first, let's say his first week, a blitzkrieg. I really want to end this war, and this is what I want. And you have to abide by it. He didn't. So now it's his war. This war is not the previous cadaver in the White House war and the Democrats' war or the Secretary of Genocide Blinken's war. No, now it's Donald Trump's war. And now he's totally lost. Once again, coming back to our previous, a few minutes ago, because he has no strategy. And because, like Emmanuel taught brilliantly, or was already saying early last year when he published his book, La Défaite de l'Occident, the loss of the West, the defeat of the West. Donald Trump's job is to manage the loss of the empire vis-a-vis Russia. How can the leader of an empire possibly manage that? Out of the question. So that compounds, his lack of strategy is compounded by his incapacity and incompetence to deal with this larger-than-life phenomenon. Russia, by itself, is winning a war against the collective West, led so far by the United States, and now even if it's led Obama style, leading from behind or whatever, with the European warmongers and the chihuahuas in the front line, doesn't matter. It's still the collective, fragmented West. And Russia is winning against all of them. This is unmanageable, Nima, unmanageable. And that is the number one crucial explanation to the fact that the Trump administration, they look like a bunch of cockroaches dealing with Russia. And there's quite similar in a way, the way they are dealing with Iran, There's no strategic line to follow. There's no strategic thinking long term. And everything happening around converges towards this strategic vision. No, there's no strategic vision. So the prospects for both negotiations, I would say, Russia and Iran, are dire, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. Thank you so much for being with us today. Grande prazer.
Enorme prazer, as usual. Fantastic. Now I was looking for the messages here about the phone call. Yeah. So we're going to have phone call messages non-stop.
Obrigado, Pepe.
Obrigado, Nima. Take care. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.